Hi, welcome to our channel of IGNOU audiobooks. Indira Gandhi National Open University, School of Journalism and New Media Studies, SOJNMS, Certificate Programs. Certificate in Community Radio, CCR, English Course 1. CCR-BJM-1 Introduction to Community Radio. Block-2 Community Radio and Society. UNIT-5 Understanding Communities. 5.0 Introduction. You are now starting the second block of your Course 1: Introduction to Community Radio. In the previous block you learnt about the basic concepts of community radio. Community radio. In this block Community Radio and Society, we will try to explain how community radio and society interact with each other. This block has 4 units. Understanding communities. Ownership, empowerment and inclusiveness. Capacity building and volunteerism. Listener-broadcaster relationship and participatory programming. The list unit is titled Understanding Communities. Understanding the community is the first step in understanding the context in which community radio can thrive as a viable social process. We are all familiar with the word community. Sometime or other, we have been to community events like Durga Puja or Holi, Christmas Mass or Eid celebrations. We have all gone to community halls to attend celebrations like wedding or memorial service, enjoyed a game or a walk in community parks. We have perhaps used or come across community libraries, met friends at the community hand pumps, seen or participated in community marches or protests and demands. The first step in this block is to explore what we really mean when we use the term community. 5.1 Objectives. After going through this unit you will be able to understand the nature of communities, why understanding communities is important, how to go about understanding communities, how to put the understanding to practical use. Community in the context of community radio. 5.2 Nature of communities. If someone asked you what community you belong to, most often you would think of a geographic area like your home state or town. For instance, you might reply that you are a Rajasthani or a Hyderabadi. Or you might think of your linguistic group and say you are a Tamilian or a Punjabi. You may also refer to your caste group and say you belong to the Gupta community or you are a Jat. Some people identify with their religious sects like Jain community or a Syrian Christian or maybe a Shia or a Sunni Muslim community. You can also think of your vocation and say you are a tailor or a mechanic. There are also global and virtual communities of people who are geographically scattered, who never actually meet, but they share a common passion or a concern. These days such communities are often connected by the World Wide Web. A community of interest is a community of people who share a common interest or passion. On the internet there are millions of such groups or communities such as music lovers MPJ.com or mountain climbers ABC of mountaineering.com. The old men and women in your neighborhood can form a group or club to deal with specific problems associated with age and like to be treated as an independent community of the elderly. Community of practice, COP, is a term defined by the British Standards Institute to identify groups who bring together or attract people to share their knowledge and create better working practices for the organization. For instance, Forum for Sustainable Land Management, SLM, links research experts and organizations engaged in implementation of land management for development in order to integrate research learnings effectively into practice. The list of communities is virtually inexhaustible. The word community itself is derived from the Latin communitas, meaning the same, which is in turn derived from communis, which means common, public, shared by all or many. Communis comes from a combination of the Latin prefix com, which means together, and the word monies, which has to do with performing services. All these would be valid responses for identification of a community, and there could be more. We all belong to several communities at once. We identify ourselves with groups of individuals with whom we share common interests or experiences, history or geography. 5.2.1 Who is the community? The word community for us, in the context of community radio, will most often mean people living within a certain geographical area. A community is also not just a collection of individuals but a socio-cultural system. The community has a life of its own which goes beyond the total of the lives of all its members. All socio-cultural elements of a community, from its technology to its shared beliefs, are transmitted and stored through symbols and practices. A community, for example, of isolated hamlets may have fuzzy geographical boundaries, but a common language or similar cultural traditions. In the Kutch region of Gujarat, for instance, villages are often miles apart with barren stretches of land, and though the villages may function on a daily basis as small independent settlements, but they are all part of an integrated community. They speak the same language, and usually seek relationships in the forms of marriage and trade with residents of other villages within the Kutch area. The geographical boundaries of communities in such cases are sometimes difficult to determine with precision. Let us explore some of the recognized definitions of community. You will need to understand a community in its totality, and therefore these definitions will be useful tools for exploring how a community is to be approached. 5.2.2 Some more definitions in sociology. A community has been defined as a group of interacting people living in a common location. However, the definition of the word community also means individuals who share characteristics, regardless of their location or degree of interaction. The simplest meaning of community is a group of people who share some common features or parameters. These common parameters can be living with a specified geographical location, ethnicity, common language, similar social and cultural traditions, gender, religion, age. Another definition that emphasizes on common interests defines community as a group of people who have a sense of common purposes and or interests for which they assume mutual responsibility, acknowledge their interconnectedness, respect their individual differences among members, themselves to the well-being of each other, and the integrity and well-being of the group. 5.2.3 What do communities do? Individuals invest time and energy in the community they belong to. This may take various forms. 1. A social commitment, like when we attend social, cultural and religious functions organized by the community, is a form of investment of time and energy for the community. For instance, different communities in India celebrate the onset of the new year at different times. The Telugus celebrate Ugadi, the Tamilians celebrate Vishu, the Punjabis celebrate Baishakhi, and so on. Each community has its own way of celebration, which includes special music, dance, rituals, foods, and so forth. Participation in these activities gives an individual a distinct community identity and a sense of togetherness like a large extended family. 2. We also develop personal awareness by being a member of a community. We participate and contribute to meaningful activities for the benefit of the community we belong to. For example, we may be part of a community that seeks to spread awareness about people living with AIDS, PLA. Groups like Positive People, which advocates for the rights of such persons, tries to remove misconceptions and stigma and restore human dignity. Being a part of such communities gives us a sense of doing something for the benefit of others, like community service. Communities give us a sense of self-worth. 3. We identify with communities that connect us to our work and profession. There are students' groups, farmers' cooperative or neighborhood civic groups that give us opportunities to develop, learn better negotiating power, and help in overall empowerment. Such communities provide opportunities for self-development. Sometimes we belong to some communities incidentally or accidentally. The community in which the family we are born into belongs is one such example. Another interesting example could be like this. A person is living in a place where another community lives. A chartered accountant goes to work in an IT company, but the person is not an IT expert. However, the person accidentally becomes part of the IT expert community because the bulk of the people in the organization are IT experts. In contrast, we can choose to be part of a community. Let us say a person has chosen to become a radio jockey. The profession makes the person part of a community of broadcasters where there are radio jockeys, program producers, script writers, and many other professionals all engaged in the business of broadcasting. Being in a community gives us a sense of being connected. In fact, we all want to belong to one community or other because we are by nature social beings and like to interact with other like-minded individuals or neighbors. Communities can come together for leisure, sport, relaxation and fun. Communities act as contexts for our daily living, learning and education, social or spiritual development, livelihoods, problem solving, etc. A number of factors and circumstances determine the degree of belongingness or cohesiveness, the reasons for sticking together, that individuals feel in a community. Some of the factors that link individuals to communities could be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Intent, the purpose why individuals stick together like a hobby group. Belief, a specific belief or faith like a religious sect, belief in a philosophy. Resources, shared resources like water, land, institutions like schools, etc. Needs, professional, livelihood, social, spiritual, etc. Risks, threats faced in the larger society, as in people living with AIDS, and illegal migrants, unauthorized slum dwellers, etc. So far we have explored simple definitions of a community, how they come about and what they do. Sometimes a community is not a stable and cohesive unit that is easily identified or understood. Communities can be multi-layered, existing in a larger social context, coming together for a cause or for a limited span of time. There are communities within communities, and the same individuals can belong to several communities at once. The context in which we are learning about communities is one where we are trying to introduce a community resource, a community radio that will cut across these circles, addressing the needs of several communities at once. 5.3 Understanding the community. We have just noted that the context in which we are attempting to understand the term communities to introduce the community to a new resource, community radio, that will find an identification with the community. We have started with the premise that all those who live within the geographical area where the radio can be heard are part of the community for our community radio. We are aware that this geographical community may not be a homogeneous whole but contains different subgroups of communities within the broad defined geographical area. When it comes to using a resource, all these different groups will pull in different directions, sometimes together and sometimes even in opposing directions. Everyone in the community has a right, a responsibility and a role to play in community radio. People live in a community by virtue of the things which share in common, and communication is the way in which they come to possess things in difficulties. Community radio being a new activity, a large section of the community would have to be made aware, motivated and mobilized to make the best use of community radio. While there would be some common points where communities will converge, each group within the larger community will have its own needs and demands for communication, and the community radio must cater to all. Let us take up a possible scenario. Let's say a community radio is going to be set up in a small town, which is in an agricultural area, and we are trying to understand who can be the possible listeners. We try a survey and find 1. The majority of the listeners come from the agricultural communities, engaged in different kinds of activities associated with farming, but there is a small group working in a brick factory. They belong to a migratory group and do not normally interact with the farmers. 2. The farmers want to use community radio to share information on market prices. They want weather-related information on a regular basis, seek support and advice from other farmers on a particular kind of pest that has appeared in recent times. They blame the brick factory for this problem. 3. In the same farmer community, women go to sell vegetables in the nearly city markets. The lack of proper safety of the roads that take them to the market is a major concern. The women want to talk about this problem on radio and are aware that the village panchayat is not taking any interest in their problem. 4. In some of the villages within the transmission area, the youth prefer to hear programs on the new employment opportunities outside the village because they are not interested in the traditional farming profession. 5. The workers in the brick factory have their own cultural traditions and want to sing or want to present their music/folk theatre on the radio. They want radio to support their cultural activities with regular programs. But they are a different linguistic group and their music/songs are not popular with the majority community. 6. There is an NGO working in public health and wants to educate people about a current health issue like fluoride content in the local drinking water and its adverse impact on health, the importance of simple hygiene through radio programs. The NGO knows how to make radio programs and wants to take over 1 hour every day for publicizing their work. 7. The influx of migrant laborers in the brick factory has its own problems and their presence is a reality which is resented by the larger agricultural community traditionally living in that area. 8. There is a residential school for the visually impaired who look upon radio as their main source of information and entertainment and want programs that would entertain as well as address their particular needs. As you can see from the nature of some of the examples, the issues are dynamic and are likely to keep changing constantly. All these and many other similar issues will come up in any pre-broadcast survey you will need to conduct while the radio station is being set up. A survey is the starting point to understand a community for a community radio initiative. The survey will throw up the strength and possibilities of a community vis-a-vis radio programs. It will expose the contradictions and diversities with the community subgroups and will help to map the community resources. It will also help to decide important questions like: who gets time on radio? When? How much time should a section of the community get? Who are the dominant sections within the community and who are the marginalized? Questions like these that need to be tackled, and the answers come from understanding the community. As a community radio person, you take on the role of a facilitator or an animator who actually helps the community identify its needs and priorities. You also help the communities realize their strengths and capabilities and guide them on how community radio can harness these. This in turn is possible only if you know who constitute the community, what they seek and what they can do. 5.3.2 How do we go about understanding the community? Understanding a community will consist of several steps. 1. Describing the community or profiling it. 2. Identifying their needs and concerns. And 3. Recognizing their strengths and capabilities. Let's examine each of these steps in some detail. 5.3.3 Profiling the community. A basic description of the community would include demographic data, factors like geographical location, male-female breakup, age breakdown, occupations, size of families, household incomes, household possessions, etc. help illustrate a community profile. Let us see why these are important. For instance, You might be working in a rural community, where a high percentage of men migrate to towns and cities for work, leaving the women to run the homes and bring up the children. A community radio in that area will be dominated by women and their needs as a single parent. Or the community radio you are planning to join is near an urban slum which has a huge migrant male population who have left behind their families in other towns or villages. In such an area, community radio might have to look into the entertainment needs of the migrant workers, offer information on modes of banking and transfer of money. As you can see, the issues of interest and concerns in both these groups would differ. You will need to understand the community before you plan what kind of programs the radio can broadcast. There are communities in villages of South Gujarat, where most of the younger population lives and works abroad, and the community consists primarily of retired older people. A community in the Nyanza region of western Kenya, Africa, where a large number of the younger men and women have succumbed to HIV/AIDS, mostly consists of grandparents and grandchildren. You need a detailed profile of the community to understand its needs, cultural habits, local festivals, crops, food habits, local beliefs, all form part of the community profile. Other factors like caste and religion also form part of the community profile. There could be tension between communities sharing a geographical area. Also, there could be a special bond between two completely dissimilar communities living within the same region. Another important aspect of profiling the community is to get a sense of the prevalent community institutions like schools, colleges, libraries, social and cultural groups, civil society organizations working in the area, elected bodies, civic bodies, health centers, etc. All these can be leveraged to contribute to the community radio station. For similar reasons, important people in the community like elected members, elders, opinion leaders, professionals like doctors, lawyers, etc. should also be listed. All these are stakeholders in community development. An important objective of community radio is community development. As a community radio person, you are also a community development practitioner, and the skill, sensitivity and relevance that you bring to your work will make an important contribution to community development. In the unit on needs assessment, in Block 3, you will learn about the various sources of information and the different methods of collecting information in detail. Here, we are simply stressing on why it is important to profile the community.
A case study, E-Tuk project in Kotmare. The E-Tuk is a low-cost mobile radio station and telecenter that encourages increased participation and access to new and traditional media and information communication technologies by marginalized and rural communities in Sri Lanka. The E-Tuk operates as an extension to an existing community multimedia center and radio station in the Central Hill region of Sri Lanka. The project complements this existing community telecenter and radio station through the implementation of a mobile unit that facilitates first-mile access to remote and marginalized communities. A survey conducted as a part of periodic audience research brought forward the following problems the community was facing. 2. Mobility within the target audience of the station is limited due to the high cost of public transport, irregular services and associated time involved in travel. 2. Access is further restricted due to perceptions of ownership of the community facilities due to factors such as caste, gender and ethnicity. Understanding the community needs, the Kotlunale Community Radio developed a new concept of mobility and called it E-Tuk. The E-Tuk extended the services of a traditional telecenter and radio station, taking the facilities outside of the studio and classroom and directly to the village. Programs are recorded, produced and reviewed with, by and in the community before broadcast, providing a greater sense of ownership and authentication. The center is serviced by both verses at 128 kilobits per second and 115 kilobits per second CDMA connection. This is currently being upgraded to a 512 kilobits per second VPLL connection that will allow full-screen video conferencing and live streaming of the radio station's programming via the internet and interactive broadcasting from the mobile unit. This helped the Community Multimedia Center to increase community participation, expanded community awareness of its activities, opportunities and services available. Radio reporters of Kotmare were able to pursue and identify locally relevant issues more closely and verify by visiting the surrounding villages and speaking directly with the community. The increased visibility due to these local interactions has also led to a greater level of awareness and support for the center, leading to increased volunteerism and sustainability. In the above example, what you have seen is not only what the community needs, but also what the community is capable of. That is, its inherent strengths and how community radio has been used to mobilize, organize and harness that strength. Can you see how understanding the community is also about understanding its needs? 5.3.4 Identifying community needs and strengths. Need has been defined as the gap between what is and what should be, or the gap between real and ideal. We all have several needs: physical, emotional, psychological, spiritual, social, etc. There are also several levels and hierarchies of need. For example, for a community of men working as migratory labor away from their homes, one of the primary needs could information flow to about their family, and a secondary need would be a source of entertainment after a hard day's work. Let's list out some of the needs that will be useful for you to identify in a community. 1. Felt needs, those which we feel or desire. 2. Expressed needs, where the individual moves from feeling a need to expressing it. 3. Future needs, which is not a need at present but will be sometime in future. 4. Latent needs, where the person may not be aware of the need. 5. Critical needs, which if not fulfilled can threaten the very well-being of an individual. The study of needs is vast and fascinating. As a community radio person, you are concerned with a different type of need: a communication need, an information and communication need that serves as a catalyst to help realize other real needs. Let me tell you about what a community radio can achieve in a community participatory project. In addition to the radio programs, a voluntary donation drive was mobilized through the radio for building a road that will connect the villages with the district headquarters. Various people offered to donate cash, labor, know-how and so on. Soon, the state authorities had to put in place a committee with representatives from various stakeholders. Within the committee, catalyzed by the community radio, a pressure group was formed to interact with this committee. The local, block and district level authorities were approached. After a few months of tenacious struggle, a project was finally launched under the Rural Employment Scheme. The radio carried regular updates, which also acted as a monitoring mechanism. Before the next monsoon, proper roads had come up and there was talk about building the bridge to fully solve the water logging problem. This is no fairy story. In a small village in the district of Garwa, a community radio program broadcast through Air Daltonganj, supported with regular ground-level activities, the community had forced the authorities to construct roads, repair the bridge and set up a small veterinary center. The program is called Chela Ho Gaon Mein. That is the power of a community radio. It works through organizing, pressurizing, demanding and asserting, and finally actually getting the desired action. Sometimes, in the real world, things are more difficult and will require patience and tenacity to keep the struggle going for a long time. But the important point is to understand the community and work towards making the radio a tool for community development. Throughout your course, you will come across many more success stories. You must keep in mind, of course, that it is ultimately the community, and not the community radio alone, that helped the people get the road. The community radio program highlighted the need for building the road, and the improved awareness thus created encouraged the community to work for achieving the goal. The process was a joint effort. Community expressed its needs while interacting with community radio. Reporters felt need for a road that had not been expressed with a collective voice. Community radio helped to change that to a expressed need. The Community Action Plan was initiated and catalyzed by the community radio. Community members and local NGO mobilized the community to rally around the need and start the process of interaction with local authorities. Community radio offered a platform for the interactions. Community participated to launch the project and eventually bettered their lives through a democratic process. Community radio regularly monitored the progress and kept up the pressure for action all through the project. Community understanding process begins with the awareness of a problem. The steps towards community understanding are broadly similar in most situations. The first step is to recognize the concerns, become involved and identify all players. Clarify the concerns by learning the extent of the problems. Consider the choices, alternatives, that are available and identify their effects, consequences. These are the most critical steps in understanding the community and its needs. The next challenge is to learn how community decisions are made, who makes them and how members like to participate in the decision-making process, and finally, evaluate the community needs informally and assess how the community would react to the new ideas and offers of solutions. 5.4 Community in the context of community radio. Let's try to consolidate all that we have discussed in terms of understanding communities in the context of community radio, to see how we might be able to put our understanding to practical use. In the context of community radio, the community will consist of people who are able to receive the radio broadcast, that is, those who live or work within the coverage area of the transmitter, which is roughly within a radius of 5 to 10 kilometers around where the community radio transmitter is located. Depending on the location, whether rural, semi-urban or urban, the nature of communities will differ. This will not be a homogeneous group. Within this coverage area would be men and women, boys and girls, belonging to different occupations, castes, religions, income groups and so on. Each will have their own expectations, needs and concerns. As a community radio person, you would need to get a good sense of the demographic profile of the people in the coverage area. All the people who live in the area are the listeners for community radio. Depending on the location, there could also be several commercial establishments, factories, and shops in the area. These are very good centers of listening because in such shops, workplaces, a radio is often kept running all through the time the shop or workplace is open. Each group again will have its advantages and constraints. For instance, traders and shopkeepers could listen to the programs throughout the day, during their working hours, but if they do not live there, cannot hear the programs outside working hours and holidays. By contrast, those who live in the area, but work elsewhere, can only hear the broadcasts before they leave for work, or after they return. Occupation of men and women also has a close bearing on the people who listen. For instance, if most people work in the fields, radios can be taken along to the fields. Similarly, people who are mostly self-employed and work out of homes can listen as and when they want. Within the coverage area there would be several institutions, like schools, colleges, civil society organizations, trade unions, women's groups, senior citizen groups, civic bodies, public amenities, hospitals, social and cultural clubs, etc. Listing these form an important part of building the community profile. These institutions also provide a good starting point for locating opinion leaders and community elders. They in turn yield a rich source of information in understanding the various community groups. They also help provide access to other members of the community. But remember, they will tune into the community radio channel only when the community Radio addresses their needs and expectations. Need identification is a complex and dynamic process. A separate unit is devoted to explain needs assessment, where you will learn more about the methodology. It is not a one-time activity. People have several needs, amongst which information and communication needs form a big segment. These needs play a vital role in problem solving and fulfilling other needs. Information needs are not always obvious and felt, that is, people may or may not know that they need a certain kind of information. For instance, if a factory producing hazardous chemicals comes up in their area, people living there might only be thinking of new employment opportunities and may not know about the polluting effects of the chemical plant. Thus they have a need and a right to be informed but may not know or be able to articulate it. Similarly, when the government announces a welfare program, people may not be able to take advantage of it because it has not been properly publicized, because they do not know about it and they will not seek any information on how to avail the benefit. A community facilitator or animator, or a development practitioner like the community radio person can fill this information need. Likewise, the community radio person can also help communities articulate their needs and support these with relevant information. Communicating is a natural process for all human beings. As social beings, we all need to communicate and share our joys and concerns and solve our problems. While communities do exist and people belong to them, for any development activity, often communities have undergone to be regrouped and redefined consciously around a cause, and the linkages and interconnectedness strengthened around identified causes. Community radio provides an intimate platform for people to tell their stories and a powerful tool for community building. Only through understanding the community can this tool be appropriated for the maximum benefit of the community. It is always advisable to work through community volunteers to understand a community, its needs and ways to develop a strategy for community interaction. In addition, if a network of local groups can be developed for radio, it would greatly enhance the understanding of the diverse forces working within the community. 5.5 Summary. We began this unit with what is the nature of a community and how to identify a community. We also learned the root of the word community from original Latin. We then explored some of the definitions of community and then moved to link community with their geographical location or where they live, because we have to focus on how to identify a community for a community radio initiative. Next, we explored what a community does, how their activities, social as well as professional, link individuals and make them part of a community. We also understood how the activities of a community are important for creating a profile of the community. After we had learned to profile a community, we moved towards understanding the community in different ways so that we know how to select the aspects of their life that need special attention for a community radio initiative. The importance of in-depth understanding of the community was emphasized in the next phase of the learning material, as this is a vital aspect in making the radio station relevant and acceptable to the community. Understanding the community leads us to recognize their needs and how these needs can be translated into radio programs. We went a step further and learned how the radio should function as a tool for social development for the community, helping in expressing their needs, mobilization of members to demand for their needs, and help towards the fulfillment of the need by interaction with community elders and opinion makers. And finally, we learned the linkages that the community and the community radio should ideally develop so that it is recognized as the voice of the people. Thank you. Subscribe to our channel for more updates, and we will see you with the next chapter.